What's up, you guys? I'm back. I'm super happy to be filming again. It's been a really long time. Basically, I never planned for this to really be a thing. Starting this YouTube channel, I was planning to just make some videos over Corona times to give some guidance to the people who were using the take-home clay from my studio. This stuff right here, so to keep people in clay over Corona times while we were closed, I was selling these chunks of clay so people could work at home and come back and we would fire and glaze everything for them. That's the whole reason I started making these videos, but it's actually been really fun. And we're still doing the take-home clay and I still want to do these videos. So I've been kind of figuring out how I'm gonna, work it into my schedule, how the setup is going to be and everything. This is still very like DIY, still filming on my phone. And I know the audio is not so good, but hopefully I will make some improvements to that in the future. But in the meantime, I wanted to show you a new skill that a couple of people had been suggesting. And that is a plaster mold. So these are super fun because what you can basically do is take like any object, or not any object, many objects around your home and make a mold out of it to make any shape you want. So this mold was actually made with this little the thing that goes under a plant pot. You can make these like really easily, and I think it's a little bit intimidating because a lot of people who have worked with clay before have never worked with plaster, but plaster's like so easy, guys. So let me just show you how to make that, and then we can make a little plate out of the mold so we see the whole process from start to finish. So let's get going. So let's talk for a moment about the form that you're going to be making a mold from. Basically, there's two things you need to keep in mind. One is the shape, and two is the surface, the material surface. So this is glazed. It's glazed ceramic. It's just industrially made, but it's glazed on the inside, and this is perfect. So what you want is something that's not porous. So glazed ceramic, metal, plastic, these types of things work really well. Wood or unglazed ceramic, or I don't know, other things that are porous won't work so well. So that's number one. The second thing is the shape of the piece. So this one, like at a cross section, is shaped like this. So this is really good because it allows the mold to be released. You don't want something that's 90 degrees. I mean, ideally something that's it's so hard to draw with. Okay, so something that's 90 degrees. You could do this, but it's going to probably have a hard time getting out of the mold. What you definitely can't do is like something that has an undercut to it. So this is the mold will sit in here, but it like this wide part, it's not going to be able to come out through the smaller part. So that's definitely something that you can't have. Something that has an open top is definitely the best. It doesn't have to be round like this. It could have like for example, we could make a mold out of this shape. Like it can be a different shape so long as there's all the cuts are open so that the mold can be released. Okay, so once you have your shape, you'll need a few more things. A scale. This is so we can calculate the plaster. I'm just using a kitchen scale. And a spoon to mix. Of course, you need your plaster. So this is just in a yogurt container. I have like a big amount of plaster at the studio that I took this out of. So the plaster, it should be modeling plaster. So it's gypsum plaster is what it's actually called. There's a bunch of different types of plaster. You don't really want to be using the plaster that you'd use to make the like walls with. This should be a specific type of plaster. I think it's most often called modeling plaster. Or if you buy it from any ceramic supply store, any plaster used for subcasting or making molds. I think most ceramic supply stores will only have this type of plaster, which is good. So just go to your ceramic supply store. Okay, so you need some water, another container to mix your plaster in, some lubricant. So I just have some lotion, not ideal, but it's what I have, that's fine. I think it will still work. And then a mask. So while you're mixing the plaster, until it's completely wet, you want to be wearing your mask, so you're not breathing in any of the plaster particles. That's really, nope. You don't want to be breathing that in, so wear your mask. Okay, so first things first is to lubricate your mold. So I'll just use a bit of lotion. This is nothing special, it's just lotion. Better than this would be Vaseline, or also, what do they call that? Mold soap. It's like some commercially made product that's specifically used for making molds. However, I usually don't have what I need lying around, so I've learned that lotion works just fine. Definitely Vaseline works better, but I think we'll get this out. I'm pretty sure I've done this mold with lotion before, so we'll see. So just put in a decent amount. You know, there's a little bit of residue left over, but that's fine. Okay, I'm gonna set that aside for now. And now I'm going to mix my plaster. So, put on your mask, folks. First thing you need to do is weigh the container that you are mixing the plaster in, because you don't want that to be part of your calculation. Grams, here we go. Okay, so it's 34 grams. Okay, I'm gonna write that down. Right, 34 grams, okay. So now I'm gonna kind of eyeball how much plaster I need. I'm not gonna weigh it. I think I just rather look at it by the size of the container and figure out how much will fill that. Keeping in mind that we're adding water to this too. But of course I would rather have too much plaster than too little. Can't really add it afterwards, so I guess I'm doing like 4 or 5 scoops. This is how much plaster I have. Now I'm gonna weigh that. Okay, so now we have 169 grams. Okay, 169 grams is the weight of the bucket plus the plaster inside of it. So I need to subtract the weight of the bucket. So 169 minus 34 grams, that was the weight of the bucket. And so we have 135. Great. So 135 grams is how much plaster we have. Okay, so we want the ratio of plaster to water to be 5 to 4. Okay, remember this one. This is going to be on the quiz. 5 to 4. Okay, so 5 plaster, 4 water. Okay, this is a ratio. Remember? Math? Okay, so then we do a proportion calculation. So this is how you do that, remember? So 135 over x equals 5 over 4. Fun fact, I love algebra. You want to cross multiply them, right? So 135, you take 135 times 4 equals 540. And then you take that divided by 5, 108. In case this bit doesn't make any sense to you, just take the two that are opposite, multiply them, and divide them by the other one, the other number, and then you solve for x, okay? I'm going to put this back on here. So we have our scale, and I'm going to tare it. So it should go to 0, right? Or you can just add it to the total weight. So I need to add 108 grams of water. Just going to add water until it says 108. Okay. So now we're mixing it. So now at this point you actually, you don't have a ton of time. It should be pretty liquid now. I guess it would be like milk or something like that. Bit kind of goopy, but not too much. Right? So you want to really mix it well. Make sure there's no clumps in it. Now, once you've gotten all the clumps out, want to pour it into your mold. Okay, so when you're pouring, you don't want to slop it around so much. Just pour a little bit, and what you want is the plaster to like expand from one point. You want it to kind of gloop through and not like splash down, because when it's splashing down in a bunch of chunks, it's going to give you bubbles. So, oh my gosh, this was the perfect amount of plaster. All right. So that's it. So now we're not quite done. What we want to do is kind of shake it a little bit. If you can see, there's a bunch of little bubbles on the top. So we want to kind of get those out. So I'm just like lifting it up really slightly and tapping it on the table. You can also like shake the table. So I'm trying to basically bring the bubbles up. It's fine if they're on the bottom. You see there's some bubbles on here, but what you really don't want is the bubbles to be on the other side. This is going to be the used side. So I'm just gonna tap them, and hopefully all the bubbles will pop to the top. I do this for about a minute or so. Great, done. Now you just wanna let this sit for a while. So I think it takes about like, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. Then we can pop it out.
It's been like 5 minutes. It's like pretty much solid already, but if I touch it, I'm gonna get some on my fingers. So I'm gonna let this dry for a little bit longer. And in the meantime, I will show you what you can do once your mold is dry. What I'm going to do is just make a slab mold, and we can make like basically the same thing that we made the mold out of, but you know, handmade and probably in a nicer color. I finally brought home one of these great wedging boards from the studio. So I really like to roll out slabs on these types of surfaces. I actually have another video, I'll link down below, about how to make something like this. But if you don't have something like this, you can just use a piece of cloth to roll out your slab. You don't want to roll it out directly on your table. And I've explained multiple times why you don't want to do that, so I'm not going to do that again. Watch my other videos, guys. Okay, so I'm using a speckled stoneware clay. So then I need a rolling pin and 2 thickness gauges. So what these are just sticks that I got from the shop that are 1/2 centimeter in thickness. And that will help us to gauge how thick our slab should be, so we don't make it any thinner than 1/2 centimeter. 1/2 centimeter or 3-4 millimeters is probably the thinnest I would go. Right, so just gonna roll out my slab now. So the key to rolling slabs is to not do too much in one go. So I'm sort of flipping it and moving it around as I roll it. So what happens is, as you're rolling it, it gets pushed into the grain of the fabric, and then it won't move anymore. And also flipping it and turning it is good to sort of get different angles of stretching. So it sort of stretches out in an even way versus all in one direction, because then you could end up with cracks in that direction. So I'm just rolling it so I can have a nice circle shape that will fit perfectly over my mold and not have too much waste clay that I have to recycle. Basically, I'm just gonna roll it until the rolling pin is rolling along the wood and there's no more resistance from the clay. So we have an even 1/2 centimeter slab. Now what I want to do is I want to compress the clay. So for that I'm going to use this rib, and I'm going to just smooth the clay out. What this does is it not only gives you a nice surface for the clay, but it also compresses the clay. So rolling out the clay, it puts a lot of stress on the clay, and it wants to crack when it's under stress. So by compressing the clay, you're kind of smoothing it out, relaxing it, and pushing the particles of clay back together so that it's not going to crack. Now I have my mold. So I want to elevate it so the edges are going to hang off so the extra clay can go somewhere. And then I'm just going to lift it up, place it down. Right, so then I can just start forming the mold downward. I obviously have way too much clay, so I'm going to cut off the excess. So you don't want to push down too much because then it's going to fold here before you cut it. So I'm just going to cut off some of the excess so it doesn't have that clay in the way, so it's not inclined to fold. So what I would do is kind of push and then cut, push and then cut. And then when you're getting these cracks, that's totally fine, but you want to smooth them over with the rib to kind of prevent the cracks. This particular clay tends to crack a lot, so you gotta be a little bit extra careful with it. There's other clays that are a bit more plastic. So now push it out a bit more, and now I'm going to hold my needle tool like straight across, and I'm gonna find the bottom of the mold. Hold the needle tool up against the mold, and then pull it along here so that I get a cut that's exactly where the mold ends. I'm also using my thumb to sort of push down those folds as I go around so I get an even cut. If you have one of those little turntables, that's handy, but you can use a jar like I'm using. So make sure your tool is flat, like parallel with the table, so you get an even cut. Okay, so this is all extra. We can recycle that later. And now I'm going to focus on making sure this is nice and flat. And I can rib it a little bit to help the clay. Maybe Peanut's gonna come say hello. Peanut, wanna come say hi? Wanna come? This dog is like a cat, like she comes when she wants to. Okay. So you can see we have a dish that's like basically pushed all around here. Now I would let this dry for maybe another 20 minutes before popping it off. Actually, in reality, at the studio, I would put this in front of a fan for like 5 minutes so I can pop the mold off. You want it to kind of dry and settle on the mold for a little bit before you pop it off so it can kind of relax into the shape that it is. So. Okay, so it looks like our mold is almost ready. One thing I would do before it's completely dry is that I would smooth out the bottom. So I just take a rib and kind of smooth out the bottom. I also like to take the point and go around the edge a little bit to smooth that out, because oftentimes because of water tension, the plaster kind of goes up against the edge, and we want to not have that sharp point. It also helps to release the plaster. So it's kind of like sandy right now, like it's like basically dry, but like if I scrape it, it comes off like a sandcastle kind of material right now. Oh, and also one thing that you'll know the plaster is working when you can feel the heat. Like this is actually really warm right now. So now to release it, I'm hoping it's ready. It might be a little bit too dry. Let's see. I'm just gonna tap it against the table to kind of release it. Oh, that was easy. Usually it takes more of a fight than that. Okay, so here it's really, so it's still wet, it's still warm. That's fine. I'm gonna let it completely dry out. I don't usually want it to completely dry out in here because yeah, then like when it's out, it can dry from all the sides. So I'm just going to use the rib while I have it to kind of smooth out this sharp edge. Now we have it, so you just want to let this dry. I wouldn't use this like in an hour. I would use this in a couple of days to let it completely dry out. I mean, this is a pretty small mold, but still, if you want to use it faster, maybe put it on a heater or put it out in the sun to dry. But I wouldn't go ahead and use it right away. One last thing that I really need to point out to you guys is that all this plaster does, to not get this plaster mixed in with your clay, it will totally destroy your clay. So little bits of extra plaster can just go into the trash. And with your plaster container and spoon, if you kind of like bend it like this, the plaster kind of comes right off in chunks like this. Well, let it dry first, and then it will come off in bits like this, and then you can reuse. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes. I pet the dog, I had a snack, and now oh, Peanut. Every time I start talking, she walks away. Yeah, now I'm going to peel off this. So it's pretty firm right now. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of pull back the edges from the plaster. And it should just pop right off. Ta-da! So you can see it's held its shape. And the inside is actually quite smooth. So I'm just going to work on cleaning up the edge and making it really nice and smooth. So as you can see, the edges are still a little bit rough. So what I'm going to do is just use my rib to kind of remove the extra clay and smooth that down. So I'll start on the inside and I'll use the curved part of the rib. And basically I'm just scraping off the extra clay. Okay, and then for the outside, I'm going to use the flat edge. And then I'm going to use the flat edge again to clean off the top. Okay, so now I just have to smooth the edge. So this is the only time I'm going to be adding water to the clay. You really don't want to add too much water at this time. I mean, we just spent all this time waiting for it to dry out so it could firm up. And so if we add water now, it's just going to make it wet and sloppy again, and then it will lose its shape. So what I'll do is just squeeze out some water, and then I'm going to hold the sponge so it sort of wraps around the edge like that, and just drag it along to smooth out any of the extra bumpies and sharp bits. Now all that's left is to sign it. I would just let this dry out a little bit before I flip it over to sign it, because I just wet the rim. So I'll just let this sit, flip it over, maybe 5 minutes, sign it, and then we're done. It can dry out and go into the bisque. We're done. Here we go. Mold piece. 2-in-1 video for you today. Ta-da! See you later.